Ronald the Rules Lawyer. Back when I reviewed the remastered GM Core book, I saw that the NPC gallery, stat blocks for non-player characters, had disappeared, and I predicted that they would release a complete book of such stat blocks, and I was correct. They have now released an NPC Core book. It makes sense after all. That was the part of the old game mastery guide that I used the most, and the new GM Core book had to take on other hats, including being the place where all the magic items were, so there wasn't room. Plus, why not have a full book of NPC stat blocks since I found that part so useful to me? So today I will give an overview of the new NPC Core book. But first, to introduce myself, I am Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'm a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. For several years, I ran an after-school middle school RPG class. Support my Patreon. I don't make money as an attorney. For an explanation why, look at the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. For first edition Pathfinder, there was an NPC Codex, which basically gave a complete stat block of every core class from level 1 to 20. That's not the approach taken this time. And for first edition, that was useful because building NPC stat blocks was an onerous task. You built NPCs the same way you built PCs back then. The new NPC Core book is more than stat blocks. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of stat blocks in this book. In fact, there are over 250. But in addition to stat blocks, there are tools for creating your own NPCs and inspiration seeds for your next session or next adventure or even campaign. First, I'll cover the stat blocks that the book provides. These are great to plop into your campaign if your characters decide to walk into a bar or walk up to a city guard, and maybe some skill checks are required or a combat. The old Game Mastery Guide pre-remaster had 48 pages of stat blocks for such a purpose, and this book comes with a hefty 210 pages. They're grouped into these two chapters. First, they're grouped by category, and second, they're grouped by various ancestries. There is no overlap between the two sections. Not all these pages are wall-to-wall stat blocks, however. Still, there's a healthy number, over 250. Here is a list of all of the NPCs in this book. Also, they generally go to higher levels than the old book did. These go beyond level 10, and we even have a level 19 stat block. In Chapter 1, they're listed by category, so if in a pinch you need to get something that is one of these things, you can go to the corresponding chapter. The list is Artisan, Courtier, Criminal, Devotee, Downtrodden, Engineer, Explorer, Healer, Laborer, Martial Artist, Maverick, Mercenary, Military, Mystic, Official, Performer, Primalist, Scholar, Seafarer, and Villain. So clearly the criminal chapter is where you want to go if you want to deal with some random muggers accosting the party, or maybe the party is dealing with a criminal underground or assaulting a thieves guild. Well, in that chapter alone, we have 13 stat blocks that range from level 1 to 15. From the lowly grave robber, a level 1 opponent. And by the way, every stat block I show on the screen, I'm gonna highlight a signature ability that they have, because that's one of the things that makes this book really good. And Pathfinder adversaries stat blocks really good in general, which is that they usually have something unique to them. Something active that you can use in combat that says, I am me. You very rarely find a creature that simply has a bite, claw attack. But yeah, with the grave robber, they can throw an embalming fluid on you that, in addition to doing acid damage, can slow your speed. The level 15 stat block is the flamboyant thief, someone you can design an entire campaign arc around. They have an ability, I say when I'm here, where they can counteract detection, revelation, and scrying magic with their own 8th rank effect. They have a group fascination ability, can do extra sneak attack damage against people they fascinate, and have a dramatic exit ability where they can put up a puff of smoke and sneak quickly away. There is an engineer chapter for every NPC in this book that is somewhat technology related, ranging from the level 1 gunsmith who can sabotage firearms. This is something done secretly before a battle. And here's an example of one of the many tools this book provides that are not simply a stat block to a GM, but it's a misfire table. If a firearm is not properly maintained or if it's sabotaged, we have a table, and this is part of the table on the screen, of what happens if you fail a DC 5 flat check after making the attack roll. If you fail, you don't fire the weapon, and something bad happens. It can jam, requiring an interact action to fix, or create a small explosion. Another engineer in this chapter is the level 13 Juggernaut, someone who walks around in a gigantic metal suit. They have an energy projector to do big area attacks, jump jets, and they can also trample creatures. They are large with their mechanical suit and can trample medium or smaller creatures. And of course, they have a self-destruct mechanism that explodes after they're knocked down to 0 hit points with a delay. The party has to do a thievery check to disable it before it explodes. The next set of stat blocks I'll highlight are the military ones. There are 11 stat blocks here, and about half of them are troop stat blocks. Troops are a kind of stat block in Pathfinder 2e that allows the system to emulate a large number of lower level creatures by combining them into a single higher level stat block that can be a challenge to a higher level party. There are actually 19 troop stat blocks in this book as a whole, by my count. In the military section, we see the low-level troop, the conscript squad, people who are poorly trained and have grabbed just whatever they can. They are susceptible to fear effects, and they have a fair chance every turn to be confused that turn. And when they attack enemy and foe alike, anyone who's adjacent to them. Very different from the very trained heavy cavalry troop, a level 7 stat block. They have a 40-foot speed, and they have the Thunder of Hooves ability. Once per round, they can try to trip every enemy next to them, or demoralize every enemy within 30 feet, with a single check in each instance. They can also trample, of course. I believe all of the stat blocks in Chapter 1 are of humans, and Chapter 2 focuses on Ancestries and includes a section of quick adjustments you can make to approximate the Ancestries represented in this book. We also get about 50 pages of stat blocks of NPCs grouped by ancestry. And, okay, it starts with this section saying that many of the stat blocks in this chapter could also fit under the sections of the first chapter, and it gives page references. I think given that a GM is probably looking for criminals under the criminal chapter, it probably would have been better to have done this the other way around, of having the criminal chapter refer to pages in the later chapter, if that makes sense. So one complaint in what otherwise seems to be an excellent book. The goblin section of this chapter has, as you would expect, appropriately hilarious creatures. The Goblin Get Gang is a troop of goblins, and I'm surprised it's taken this long before we've gotten one of these. It has Goblins Chant and Goblins Sing, which can force will saves by anyone trying to do a concentrate action, so nearly every spell cast by a spellcaster will require a will save if they're within 30 feet of this troop, or lose the spell. They're also so undisciplined, it basically means that if there's an enemy adjacent to it, they're so excited and must attack that foe before they can even move. Then we have the level 6 Big Boss Goblin, who can pull another goblin in front of them if they are attacked. And they also have Stab It, Stab It, Stab It, where they direct one of their goblin allies to attack a foe within 30 feet, and they get an additional damage die while attacking that foe temporarily. In the Halflings chapter, we have a Halfling head chef who attacks with a frying pan. As a reaction, if someone attacks them with a melee attack, they can dash some spice into their face and dazzle them. They, of course, can attack with a hot frying pan, which does fire damage as well as bludgeoning, and I love how the artwork includes a complete meal in the pan. And they also have a dash of Gordon Ramsay. They can do the Angry Rant action, where they can intimidate a foe and do mental damage with their berating words. And they could even do it on one of their own allies. The chef's assistant is shaken by the barrage of criticism, but is determined to work faster and harder. They are quickened for 1 round, but are also frightened 1. That extra action, however, can only be used to interact, step, or stride, or as part of an activity to prepare, cook, or serve food. Now, I've done this video very quickly, and so I'm sure there's a lot of fun, flavorful abilities throughout this book that I just haven't had time to read. All right, so as I said, this book is not just stat blocks. There's a lot of tools to help GMs. First, one big question people will have with a book of this nature is, what if what I'm looking for needs to be a different level than what's provided, since level matters a lot in Pathfinder 2e? Well, here's the section on that, and it says basically use the elite or weak adjustment to adjust the level by 1, and if that's not enough, look at the charts for building creatures in the GM Core book and extrapolate from there, which is kind of the advice that they have to give. And it's not that hard, at least compared to adjusting levels in first edition Pathfinder. Good God. Also, we are reminded that an NPC can have a different non-combat level from their combat level. Not every master chef is going to be a gladiator that can hold their own in a ring. We also have a very useful collection of spell lists, all grouped by theme. There are spellcasters, many spellcasters in the first couple of chapters, and you can redo their spell lists and give them a different flavor by changing their spells. And here on the screen are the Necromancer and the Stormcaller. So this increases further your options and what you can do with this book. Another useful tool is, okay, the Devotee section of the book has a lot of stat blocks of NPCs that are specific to a deity. There's the Acolyte of Iomedae, for example. This section also ends with guidelines on swapping deities, pretty straightforward ones, with a quick reference table with the major deities of Golarion. I'm showing part of that table on the screen to easily make the switch. There is also a variety of tables and just lists of things that can give a GM inspiration or are raw material for the GM to work with. In the criminals section of chapter 1 that we looked at before, there's also this bounty board, and I'm only showing some of the entries in this bounty board, but these are NPCs complete with names and their adventure hook and what their proposed reward would be and a recommended level for the party for each one. The villains section has tables with ideas for motives for the villain, different advantages a villain might have, different villain lairs, and also even dialogue, like exit lines, because of course you should try to have multiple encounters with a big villain. You've won, but only for today. My hate for you will grow every second until we meet again, and also probably their level. There are several pages covering the major organizations in Golarion, describing their characteristics and goals, and also appropriate stat blocks from this book that can be used for members of that organization. Here are the Firebrands, who are freedom fighters and dashing heroes, with a flair for the dramatic, and who like the theme. For a GM who's crafting a campaign, this can spark a lot of creativity. In the Scholars section, we have a table of ideas of what might befall a university that might call for adventurers. The Familiars might be unionizing, and maybe the party can choose what side they take. Or a sheriff is mad that the diviners of the university are revealing embarrassing secrets about them. Again, seeds of inspiration. In the Officials chapter, which deals with government bureaucrats and the like, we're given a couple pages about how laws differ in various parts of Golarion. Regulatory quirks, such as all signatures in one part of Golarion must be all written excessively in blue ink. And also ideas for what to do if the party fails in some kind of skill check in dealing with a government official. Scattered throughout the book are useful phrases to pepper into your campaign. Here is a section on dwarven curses and exclamations. In the Downtrodden section, we are given various names for random NPCs they can encounter, and also a table of possible ways that that person became impoverished. In the Mystics section, we have tables of curses, superficial ones and less superficial ones, and blessings that can happen in a campaign. Perhaps all animals distrust you inherently, or you grow floppy animal ears that make it difficult for people to take you seriously. We also have a section of the book dealing with creature companions for NPCs. Pets and familiars can be given to them. They are not given their own stat block, but instead we're given our abilities for the master to have that emulate having such a pet. Here, a flying familiar or pet can give the master the dive bomb ability. We are given similar abilities for aquatic, burrowing, scent, and toxic pets and familiars, and a couple of other more generic abilities, as well as 3 exploration activities, like the familiar who is an eavesdropper or is a skeptic, so that when you lie to the master, you have to roll twice and take the lower result. If you fail, the familiar expresses their skepticism. We also have guidelines for giving animal companions, which do not follow the animal companion rules. Basically, you add another creature from the Monster Core book, or any other source, of course. Their XP is added to the overall encounter difficulty, and we have a generic action to receive support from that animal companion and a list of suggestions of support benefits that your animal companion can provide, that you can obviously reskin. It doesn't have to be an ape to get the ape support benefit, for example. A dog companion can also menacingly growl and make a creature frightened 1. And also because of how this proposes how to implement animal companions, we're given actual stat blocks of some creatures not otherwise covered, like the trained bat, the level 5 veteran warhorse, the experienced hound, level 7, and a beast eidolon, level 10. I'm now going to end with a smattering of random cool stuff. The criminals section has some extra equipment and some spells for criminals, including the spell 500 Toads, a rare spell, I'm not sure why, to trigger traps in a 15-foot burst. I guess it's rare if GMs don't want people to just trigger traps with spells, but then that's what some spells are for, I thought. There's also Burglar's Blind, which combines the effects of invisibility with the silence spell on a creature. And it has the subtle trait, so people won't know you're casting it. A very useful spell, obviously, for a criminal. Also scattered here and there in Chapter 1 are adjustments to creatures. The Laborers section includes the Union Organizer adjustment, someone who bolsters their allies. A nice nod to union organizing and the fact that Paizo workers formed a union. How far we've gone since Agents of Edgewatch. The Martial Artist section presents stat blocks, obviously, but also a lot of the abilities for those stat blocks can be switched out. There is a last page with alternate moves that they can have. We also have a list of suggested dirty fighting tactics, and also abilities that are forbidden knowledge for Grandmasters. The Grandmaster is one of the stat blocks provided. Also, I thought this was cool, adding more variety. We're given alternate actions for troops. Instead of simply moving on the battlefield, they can change formation, which is kind of like a battle stance, you could call it. They each have a benefit and a drawback. In this case, they can loosen up their formation, suppressing their weakness to area and splash damage. However, they're less effective in dealing damage to foes with their normal attacks. Enemies' saving throws against their damaging effects are treated as 1 degree of success better. The other formations are Marching Column, Turtle Shell, and Wedge. There's a couple of meh things in this book. There's a short section on relationships, which provides 7 different states of relationships that a character can have with an NPC, and rules for how you move from one relationship tier to another. However, the effect of these tiers is purely fluff from what I can read. On the screen is what the highest level relationship is, and it's not clear to me how you're supposed to leverage this as a GM. Besides telling you something you might kind of already know. Also, I think this book could have benefited from having a alphabetized index of all of the NPC stat blocks in this book. There is a list that's grouped by level. However, some of these categories kind of blend into each other a bit, such as Devotee and Mystic and Primalist. For example, if you want to find the Necromancer stat block, you might be looking in Devotees. However, you would be wrong. It's actually under Mystic. There might be similar issues between the military and official categories. Also, the villains can fit in many of the other categories. If you're a GM using this book, I suggest skimming these sections and looking at the logic of each section. You should then be able to intuit where to find these things in the future. Despite the few things I pointed out, this book really looks like a good tool for GMs. Paizo is known for its adventure paths, which have a set path, a set campaign arc. In addition to the over 250 stat blocks, which is the biggest benefit that this book gives, they truly do try to support the GM who wants to go off the beaten trail, the beaten path, and create something of their own. Anyway, this is a laudable book. So definitely check that out. If you like the video, like. Also subscribe to my channel if you want more Pathfinder coverage. Also support my Patreon for ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. Also join my Discord community. There are now 6,000 of us, and we discuss Pathfinder 2e and other gaming. I hang out there a lot. You can also play Pathfinder 2e. We have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. That's it. I have been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.